Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. We begin the new year by looking at the issue that dominated the old one from the perspective of an author about an earlier influenza pandemic. We'll try to learn about where we are heading. Among the many tragic stories related to COVID is that of the sudden death of a newly elected upstate member of Congress. We'll hear from a reporter who covered his campaign and how the COVID culture differed from place to place. There is some good news. The Saints are back in the playoffs, but can we be assured of not having another January heartbreak? Those stories, plus disorder in Washington and the Pelicans return to the court, are in the lineup for tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. John Barry, author of the book The Great Influenza, the epic story of the deadliest plague in history. Jeff Duncan, sports reporter for the Athletic website and WVUE-TV, Channel 8, and Tyler Bridges, reporter of the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate. Let's go over to E first, and for an update on our COVID numbers, and they're just not looking good at all.
Well, you know, this was supposed to be the week where some people say this is the beginning of a turn, and maybe things are going to start getting better now, because what's happening now is the whole people starting to get vaccinated, at least at different levels. I know last weekend, like Oxnard sent out emails throughout its vast empire to people who were eligible, you know, telling them to sign up and to start getting the vaccinations. And in their case, I mean, it could be on Jefferson Highway, or it could be in Shreveport, or it could be in St. Bernard Parish. And so there are a lot of different places. And so I think tomorrow you're going to see lost people looking for different elements of Oxnard to go get their shots. And if this falls in place, that maybe, who knows, in a couple of months, maybe things will be better. But this past week, the news was certainly discouraging. The governor had a news conference, was borderline on angry, you know, saying, you know, y'all got to really start taking this seriously and putting in more restrictions, sort of going back to the old days of phase one, like a modified phase one, like restaurants are back to 25% of capacity, which is
in Orleans.
Yeah, you know, which is deadly, and restrictions for the bars, all of that. The same rules about public gatherings, and don't gather with people that you don't know. And so here we go again, and it looks like this may be 3 or 4 weeks, and who knows? Maybe by then, maybe at least the first wave of those vaccines will start kicking in. But this weekend, the news is pretty much all bad, and it was bad nationwide. And so we're just, you know, hoping for better days.
Well, we're hopeful certainly for the vaccine. It's going to be a while before we really do start seeing an impact on that. But we're seeing, like, right now we're seeing double-digit infection rates again, and that's why we're seeing the restrictions, like in Orleans, back to phase one.
Yeah, and then even with the vaccines, you know, all of them, there's 2 shots involved with them, and even after the second shot, supposedly, it takes a few weeks after that if you can see some remarkable progress. But people are saying that there's reason to believe there will be progress at some point. So
yeah, I know that's something to certainly hope for. Tyler, thanks, E. We're going to jump over to Tyler right now in another COVID-related story, and a very, very, just so sad and heartbreaking one. Our newly elected Congressman, Luke Letlow, fell victim to COVID, and he's a young man.
Yeah, he was 41 years old, and he becomes the first member of Congress, or in his case, Congressman elect to die from the virus. And I had known Luke from before, but particularly I did cover him when he was in the campaign right near the end. I went to an event in the woods of a meet at the Florida Parish's Skeet Club. And I was wearing a mask. My photographer with the Advocate newspaper was wearing a mask, and none of the people inside were wearing masks. There were about 15 people there in that clubhouse in the Skeet Club. But then Luke walked in, and he was wearing a mask, which surprised me because I had gone to 2 events in the preceding 24 hours up in Ruston, also in that 5th Congressional District, which is a very sprawling district. So up in northeast Louisiana in Ruston, I'd gone to 2 events, including one with Luke's challenger, State Representative Lance Harris. And Harris was not wearing a mask, and neither were any of the other people. But Luke Letlow at that event did wear a mask, and I talked to him about it. He said he generally wore a mask at events, but also photographs have shown up on social media after my story appeared, showing that at various events he also did not wear a mask. But again, 41 years old, he was scheduled to probably serve that district ably for many, many, many years, but now that seat is vacant.
Just really heartbreaking. Left 2 young children, of course, and a wife. And it just seemed to take him so quickly. And like you said, you were with him during the, sort of the final days of the campaign. The doctors allegedly said there were no underlying conditions. This is just really a shocker, and once again, so sad.
Yeah, again, this is a guy who had a long run ahead of him in Congress. He knew that district really, really well. He grew up in the district, lived on a farm just east of Monroe, and he had worked as Congressman Abraham's chief of staff.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so he knew the district, and he was very well liked. So he was a guy who was going to hit the ground running to represent that district. And he said he leaves behind his wife Julia and children who are 3 years old and 1 year old. So it's a big, big loss for Louisiana.
Tyler, do you get any feeling from covering the politics? Like, this is a very conservative district. Is there still that the political division there? Like, people who are more conservatives, don't believe in the mask and think it's some sort of a federal government thing. And I mean, is that still out there?
Oh, it's absolutely out there. That's what I saw when I spent 24 hours covering that district and moving around. In New Orleans, everywhere I go in New Orleans, inside people are wearing masks, and that is not the attitude in the rural areas, the small towns of Louisiana, who have bought the rhetoric of the president and others that you don't need to wear a mask. Maybe even maybe some of these people don't even believe that the coronavirus is real. And it's a bit scary when you're a reporter out trying to do your job and you're the only one wearing a mask out there.
His death, once again, he was young. He was 41. And it's a very small percentage of people in that age group of the deaths that we've had so far in Louisiana. Do you think that this is kind of hitting home in that area? People might change their attitudes a bit?
I don't know, but I certainly hope so. Sometimes it's a little hard to figure out why these folks are not listening to the scientists. And John Barry's on the show today,
yeah,
and he can speak much better to these issues. But it's confounding when you go out to these kinds of areas and folks just don't want to seem to believe what seems to be so obvious.
He didn't even have the chance to be sworn in as congressman, something that, from what I read, he was just so passionate about and so excited about and had such hope for. What did he express to you when you did talk to him?
Yeah, this is a guy, he had served as Congressman Abraham's chief of staff, and so he knew the district really, really well. He knew the issues really, really well. He won a big victory with 62% of the vote, so he was going to hit the ground running in Washington, and I think he was going to ably represent that district, which is the second poorest in the country. I think he was probably going to represent it very ably and try to bring back a lot of money for that district.
And there'll be an election to seek a replacement?
Yeah, the primary will be March 20th, and if there's a runoff, that would be in April.
Okay, Tyler, thanks a lot. I mean, just really such a sad, tragic story, and there are way too many of them, John, across the board for us now. Now this state has, I think, over 7,000 people that have died from COVID-19. You wrote, this incredible book about the influenza pandemic from 100 plus years ago now. How are we moving along with handling COVID-19?
Well, we are not doing too well. Other places around the world are doing quite a bit better. I'll give you one example. I think maybe the country most like the United States might actually be Australia, even more than Canada. Very individualistic. And yet they have 920 deaths. You adjust for population, that would be less than 13,000 deaths in the United States. We have 365,000 deaths. So there's a Western individualistic country that took the virus seriously and contained it. And of course, their economy is doing a lot better too. Mm-hmm. And Trump completely blew it. We have people, as Tyler just said, who don't believe masks work. some who don't think the virus is at all serious. It is a horrendous failure. And other politicians who echoed Trump is, so we're not doing well. And I'll say some other bad news, and then I'll get to some good news.
Okay.
In terms of the bad news, this virus is highly transmissible. To get to so-called herd immunity, where enough people are infected that it's not going to spread easily, it'll sort of die out. The early projections were 60 to 70%. They've actually gone up from there. And there's some data on that. Manaus, a city in Brazil of several million people, 76% of the population's infected before that virus stopped spreading in a significant way, 76%. So that would probably be a good number for a target that we would need for herd immunity, either through infection or through the vaccination.
And where about are we right now?
On the good stuff,
do we know that? Where about are we now in terms
well,
of?
It's probably about somewhere around 15% of the population, I would guess.
Long way to
Maybe
go.
a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 15 to 20%. The good news, I'm not sure if people realize just how good the numbers on the vaccine are. So let me compare it to influenza. 95% efficacy, 95% less likely to get the disease if you get vaccinated. The best influenza vaccine ever produced was 62% effective. And usually it's under 50%. Most influenza vaccines, 30, 40, maybe if we're lucky in the 50% effective. So this vaccine is 95% effective. That is extraordinary. The problem, of course, is distribution and production. Just today, the Biden officials said that Biden was going to get all the doses out there, as many first doses as possible. We'll use the Defense Production Act, felt that the manufacturing capacity was there to keep pace. The original plan was to hold some doses back for people to get their second dose 3 or 4 weeks after the first dose. Now they want to get them all out there. Of the 13 people on the advisory committee, one of them's a good friend, another I'd call a casual friend. I know a couple others. I know they spent a lot of time looking at the supply chains and so forth and so on, and they seem to feel that they can keep pace with the second doses even while trying to get a first dose in everybody's arm. And the reason for that is, at least for the younger population, just one dose a couple of weeks after they get it could be as much as 80% effective in containing it. We're not sure for people over 65 how effective it would be. But that's a strategy to get some protection out there.
What about the variant? We hear about the virus is mutated. There's a variant out there. Just how prevalent is it in the country? Is it here in Louisiana? And then how is the vaccine going to react to it?
Well, another area where the United States has fallen behind other countries is tracking the genome, sequencing various samples of the virus so that we know exactly what we're looking at. The leading country is over 50% of the viruses are sequenced. In the United States, it's about 4%. I don't know of a case in Louisiana yet. It's certainly in several states in the United States. It is a real problem. The vaccine does work against it, but it does spread more easily.
Yeah.
So we will be in a race. Even though it's not any more deadly, the fact that so many more people could get infected by it, that would actually lead to more deaths than if it was the same number of people infected but a deadlier strain of the virus.
And more pressure on the health industry, on the health system, too.
Exactly.
As you increase the cases. So do you foresee that the rollout of the vaccine is going to be stepped up, because it's been slow so far?
Right. I think even under the old system, it would have speeded up very rapidly. You get any startup is probably going to have some difficulties. But the Biden administration is very serious about this, or will be when they come in. Not that the Trump administration wasn't on this one area, but again, using the Defense Production Act, there are all sorts of options, and national leadership, using the national resources instead of entirely leaving it up to the states. That could make a big difference. I think Biden will probably hit his target of 100 million vaccinated in the first 100 days. I hope so, anyway.
So you see that's a real possibility for that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's still, yeah, I do. It's still a long way from the so-called herd immunity, even if you add in the people who have some immunity, probably from having been infected by the virus.
Yeah. All right, John, as always, a pleasure to have
but
you
short
here.
term, it's just bad news. We had 4th and Dead the other day, and there's a good chance that'll increase.
So wear masks. We need to wear masks. Get all of the precautions. Wash hands. Socially distance.
Right.
No big gatherings.
Distance number one.
Take it serious.
Distance number one. No big gatherings. I think one thing is mentioned enough that's very important is ventilation.
Yeah.
If you just open the windows, if you do have people over, open the windows and open the doors, even though it's cold.
Yeah.
Ventilation really matters.
All right, John, thanks so much. I'm going to go over now to Jeff, and hopefully we're talking real good news here, Jeff. We want to see good news. We want to see the Saints win.
Well, I think there's a lot of optimism that they will win this week, Marcia. They're the biggest favorite in the entire playoff picture this weekend. Of course, a year ago, they were the largest favorites and lost at home to the Vikings. So there seems to be a sense of cautious optimism among Saints fans with an undercurrent of anxiety, because I think there's a sense that this very well could be the end of an era. We all know that Drew Brees is probably going to retire after this season. There's already been reports that this will be his final year. We know he signed a broadcast contract with NBC after his playing days are over. He says he has not decided yet. He told us this week he hadn't. But I think all signs point to this being his final season. And along with that, this Saints team is kind of this iteration, this second run of NFC South championship run. It feels like there's going to be a roster breakup soon because the Saints are so far over the salary cap next season that a lot of these players that have formed the core of this team will not be back. And also, a lot of Saints executives, the pro personnel director, Terry Fontenot, the assistant general manager, Jeff Ireland, are being courted by rival teams, and some of the coaches on this team, because this team has been so successful the last 4 seasons, they are in line for promotions or jobs with other teams. So there's a real sense of finality to this postseason, and I think a lot of pressure on this team to at least get to the Super Bowl after falling short the last few seasons, because they've won more games in the regular season than any team in the NFL the last 4 seasons, and yet they haven't been able to get back to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, with real heartbreaking circumstances, too, that just about drove everybody crazy here with them not getting there. Taking a look at this week's game, what are you expecting?
Well, the Saints shouldn't have trouble with Chicago. The only thing that I think would give me concern if I were a Saints fan would be if for some reason the Saints fell behind early. All the things we just talked about, right? The pressure that this team, I think, feels internally to get back to the Super Bowl, I think that would really come tumbling down on them psychologically if all of a sudden early on they were staring at a 14-0 deficit. That's what happened to them last year, if you remember, against the Vikings. It's happened a couple of times recently in Philadelphia. They fell behind 17-0 and tried to dig out of it, and they fell behind early to the Kansas City Chiefs and couldn't dig out. That's the nightmare scenario for the Saints, because I think it might give the Chicago Bears, who are huge underdogs in this game, it might give them some confidence early on. And let's remember, they're not playing in front of the normal Superdome crowd. There's not going to be that home field advantage. There's going to be about 3,700 fans in the Dome for the Saints. So it's not going to be the same environment. So the Saints won't have that advantage going for them if the Bears were to get a big lead.
Yeah. Jeff, even if Drew Brees would say, I really, really, really want to come back, how about all those rib injuries? Is that something he can survive or last through much longer?
Oh, yeah, that will heal on its own, especially in the offseason. We talked to him this week, and he said he feels really good. Those rib injuries, Errol, are very common for quarterbacks, and even the ones that wear these flak jackets. Drew's wearing a Kevlar, like custom-made sleeve around his rib area. They still can't protect against the force of a 300-pound athlete running at full speed. So he's still going to be in a little bit of pain, but they also have the ability to kind of numb that pain during the game with some shots, and he's been playing through that. And I think he's been playing very well. Sean Payton said this week he's gotten better and better every game. And you could just sense it. When we talked to Drew on Wednesday, we talked to him for 15 minutes. I don't think he cracked a smile once. I mean, there's an intensity about him this week that I think is going to carry through the rest of the postseason.
And how's the team? Healthy?
Yeah, that's another very good point, Marcia. I've covered the team for 20 years. I can't remember a team this late in the season being as healthy as the Saints are. They're going to play Sunday with 20 of the 22 starters that started the opening game, and almost all their backups are going to be healthy as well. That's very rare for this late in the season to be that healthy. And that's a credit not only to the training staff, the medical staff, but also to the way Sean Payton has managed this season. He's managed everything with the big picture in mind, putting players on temporary injured reserve so they can be healthy for this playoff run, because he knows what's on the line here for Drew Brees.
Okay. All right, Jeff. Big game this weekend. Thanks a lot. Tyler, let's go back over to you for just a little quick discussion about what went on in Washington, D.C. this week. It was, it's like indescribable. How did our delegation handle everything?
Yeah, there were two votes in the Congress once they had restored order and once the rioters had been pushed out of the Capitol. So conservative legislators pushed for a vote on the electors from Arizona and Pennsylvania. In both cases, the Congress voted to move forward, and Joe Biden has now is going to be the president. There's now no doubt about it should be on part of anybody. And in Louisiana's delegation, there are 7 members, as we talked about earlier, with the death of Luke Letlow. That seat for the 5th Congressional District is vacant. So there are only 7 seats right now in Louisiana. Cedric Richmond from New Orleans still holds that seat, although he's about to resign. He's the one Democrat. So we have 6 Republicans. And of those 6 Republicans, 5 of them voted on at least one of the 2 states to not accept the electoral votes. And Bill Cassidy was the one Republican member, the senator, who said, hey, Joe Biden won. Let's put this past ourselves and move forward. So, again, 5 of the 6 in Louisiana of the Republican delegation voted to object to the electors in one of the 2 states.
Do you think they were just taking it for the party, knowing that ultimately Biden was going to win it anyway, but just taking the party stand, and of course having no idea what else was going to be happening?
Well, my sense is that these guys don't care so much about their party. I think they probably care about their own political future, and all 5 will be on the ballot in 2022. 4 of them are House members who are up every 2 years and who all won very comfortably in 2020. John Kennedy is also up in 2022. He voted in one state. He voted to object to the electors. In the other one, he accepted it. But I would guess that they're all very mindful of their own political future and how they voted.
Okay, just a lot of unbelievable action up there in Capitol Hill this week. All right, thanks a lot, Tyler. Jeff, let's go back to you real quick because the Pelicans have started their season. How they're looking?
Well, they're 4-4 right now, Marcia. This is the first season, obviously, with new coach Stan Van Gundy. So I think they're still trying to find their way in his offensive and defensive systems. Obviously, they didn't have a normal offseason with the pandemic, and I think that's kind of added to the learning curve with the new coach. They play a home game on Friday night at the Smoothie King Center, which they should be heavily favored against the Charlotte Hornets, and then they embark on a 7-game, 2-week road trip out west. It's one of the longest road trips I've ever remember them having, and that's going to be very difficult. I think that's going to be a key stretch for them. If they can just win a couple games on that road trip, then they will come back here for an extended homestand. But this road trip coming up is going to be critical for them.
Are there any spectators?
Just a few hundred is it right now, and it's very eerie in the Smoothie King Center. It doesn't feel like an NBA game. It feels like a high school game.
Because NBA games are so loud. There's just so much activity going on with the crowd and everything else that's happening. So I guess it's kind of quiet.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of energy, and the players have talked about that. They have to kind of create their own energy and enthusiasm from the bench. It's really strange and an unprecedented situation. If you remember last year in the playoffs, everything was played in the bubble down in Orlando. Right. So this is totally different.
Okay, Jeff. All right, guys. Time to just sort of go around. Other stories, other thoughts. E, start with you.
Well, Monday, Jason Williams is going to be inaugurated as the new district attorney. We'll be entering a new era in law enforcement, and of course, he's going to have his own issues to face as well.
Tyler, over to you.
Right. Governor Edwards made the choice for March 20th will be the date of the primary election for that 5th congressional district that we were talking about, but also the seat to replace, the race to replace Cedric Richmond. Also, the primary will be March 20th, and qualifying, I think, will be January 20th.
All right. John? Some thoughts?
Well, as a former football coach, I'd say next football season, I'm pretty confident there'll be fans in the stadiums. So that's good. I do want to make one comment about what happened this week. I covered politics for 10 years. My wife worked in the United States Senate for 20 years. I know that building very, very well, spent 14 hours a day in it. I was appalled. In Washington, or one of my friends said, there are plenty of people with brains up there. There aren't a lot of people with guts. And John Kennedy's got plenty of brains. Apparently doesn't have the guts to do the right thing. And I'd say the same for some of the other Republicans up there.
Just very, very disturbing what happened, and scary to us all. All right, Jeff, we'll wrap it up with you real quick if you can.
Yes, look, this week the class for the 2021 finalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame were announced. There's a heavy Louisiana flavor, 2 New Orleans natives, Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, also former Saints great Sam Mills, and former LSU standout Alan Faneca, all among the finalists. We'll vote on that in 10 days to select the class of 2021. I think it's got a great chance to have a strong Louisiana flavor.
Terrific. All right, guys, thanks so much for joining us. Thank you all for joining us, too. And, of course, we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.